The cell membrane, as you might recall, is the outer membrane of the cell. It has a couple of main functions. The first one is that it controls what goes in and out of the cell. Secondly, it provides a barrier. It provides a barrier for the cell and its environment. For its environment. Now, one thing to know about the membrane is that it is semi-permeable. I'll write that right here, semi-permeable, which means that only some things can pass through. So it's only certain types of materials can pass through. Certain pass through. What this means, if we go over to our cell membrane model over here, is that if we have something such as carbon dioxide, an example that we gave in the organelles video, it can easily pass through the membrane and go through the other side. Yet if we have something like a calcium ion, or really any ion for that matter, it doesn't really like to pass through the membrane, so it'll be blocked off at the outside. What's important to note is that with this semi-permeable ability, it allows the membrane to create homeostasis. Homeostasis. Essentially being able to regulate what goes in and out of the cell. And so what this means is that with changing conditions, it can change what goes in and out of the cell, which is important to create a healthy cell, essentially. Now that we've taken a look at the functionality of the cell membrane, let's take a look at the individual parts of it. First, we can see this red line over here, this red shape of hexagons, and these are carbohydrates. Carbohydrates. You might be able to remember them from the biomolecules video when we tell you that ingesting these carbohydrates produce a short-term burst of energy, but on the cell membrane, it provides as a sort of a name tag and like an identification tag. So it's identification. This essentially ensures that other objects that are coming in and need to go through a cell membrane can identify where the cell membrane actually is. Over here, off to the side, we have protein. Protein. You might remember this as well from our biomolecules video, which we say that they have a variety of functions. And this really relates to the semi-permeable that only certain things can pass through the cell membrane. We talked about calcium ions and how they have a hard time getting through the cell membrane. This is because the cell doesn't want these calcium ions in large portions. But if the cell does need, for some reason, these calcium ions or anything that can't actively pass through this membrane by itself, these proteins act as transportation channels. Transportation channels. Meaning that if anything that usually can't pass through the membrane needs to pass through for the cell to survive, instead it can pass through these protein membranes and these protein channels to get through the other side. Third, we have these orange things right here, and these are cholesterols. Cholesterols. These essentially provide structure to the cell membrane. And the last part that we have are lipids, which of course everybody knows is the main constituent of the cell membrane. So when we talk about cholesterols and how it relates to lipids themselves, we have to look at a variety of temperature, really. So when we have these lipids right here, in warmer conditions, lipids tend to move away from each other. Problematically, if they move too far away from each other, then many things can get through the cell membrane that usually can't pass through. Which is why these cholesterols actively connect these lipids together, ensuring that they don't get too far away. Yet, likewise, in colder temperatures, lipids tend to bunch up together. This means that things that can usually pass through the cell membrane can't, because it's just so bundled up. Which is why the cholesterol, yet again, provides a small little barrier to ensure that these lipids don't attach too close together. Now let's take a look at the individual lipid itself, the main constituent of the cell membrane. It's made up of two main parts. First, we have a hydrophilic head, hydrophilic head, and then we have hydrophobic tails. Right, head right here. This essentially means that the head likes water, philic meaning love, yet the tails don't like water, phobic meaning fear. Important to know about the cell membrane is that it's made up of a lipid bilayer, which means that the hydrophobic ends point inward, the hydrophilic ends point toward the solution. Because usually, within the cell membrane, there's an aqueous solution on the outside. And then when we add our second lipid right here, there's an aqueous solution on the inside as well, because the cytosol, or the cytoplasm within the cell, also acts as a mainly aqueous solution. This means that the cell membrane and its lipid bilayer essentially can move in and out of aqueous solutions because the hydrophobic ends aren't touching any water. Yet if we have a lipid monolayer, and we'll have like a solution right here, an aqueous solution, well, we'll see that with a lipid monolayer, the hydrophilic ends will be at the water, and the hydrophobic ends will just point toward air. The same reason why oils and water separates, because the hydrophobic ends of the oils don't like to be in water, so instead they point up. So that's essentially a good overview of the cell membrane at the pre-AP biology level, and I hope that you've learned a lot, and I hope that you enjoyed the rest of your day.